Hi, welcome to my presentation. Today I'm going to be talking about the foundations and the development of the performing arts industry. The first thing I'm going to talk about today is live performance. There are many different types of live performance, and the first one I'm going to be talking about is street performance. Street performance dates back to almost 1,000 years ago, around the 1860s. This is also where the term busking was invented. Around the time busking was popularised, slavery had just been abolished, so it left a lot of black men and women jobless and hungry. So there was quite a huge surge in busking and beggars as like a last resort for money and food. Busking can also include many different styles of acting and performance. A big part of busking is mime and human statues. So people who go down this route don't rely on their voice, so often they must be very exaggerated with their facial expressions and their movements. This is a lot like commedia dell'arte, where often you have to rely on your exaggerated facial expressions, as commedia is normally in Italian and a lot of English people would use it, so they really heavily relied on their facial expressions and their body expressions and act in a very non-naturalistic way. Even people now, when you go to Leicester Square or Covent Garden, you'll see a lot of people who are miming or being human statues, and their facial expressions and their body language are very, very exaggerated and over the top. The only negative thing about busking is it's not a very stable job, as it's very situational, because if you're in the wrong geographical place or the wrong place where there's not a lot of people to perform to, you won't get as much money. So it's not a very reliable job, but if you're in the right place and at the right time, busking can be very, very successful. The second type of live performance I'm going to be talking about is stand-up comedy. Stand-up comedy dates back to 1831. However, it was only popularised in the 1940s during World War II. Often on the radio, comedic performers would perform live and tell jokes about what they were going through and try lighten the mood of everyone who was going through this horrible time. And they would tell jokes about everything that they were going through, and loads of viewers would relate. And in the early 2000s, stand-up comedy really started to thrive, as people like Peter Kay would have live performances and record them, and they would have them broadcasting on television, making even more money and even broadening the horizon and adding more viewers to their work. And nowadays, even comedians, they would have their shows and streaming sites like Netflix or Amazon Prime, they would pay for them and then profit off selling them on Netflix and Amazon. So stand-up comedy can be a very, very profitable piece of art, and stand-up is normally naturalistic and doesn't involve a lot of acting, as most of comedians don't play a character, but they can act out many different things. But comedians rely quite heavily on their timing and their pace so that their jokes can land properly and land well. Comedians also often break the fourth wall and involve their audience, because it makes it more personal for the audience, and the audience feel more involved, especially when the comedians joke about their audience, and it just helps the comedians' jokes land a lot better. The second bit of live performance that I'm going to be talking about are pantomimes and storytelling. Storytelling and pantomimes are quite similar, so I will be talking about them together as a collective. Both have a beginning and a middle and an end, just like melodrama, and they will have a beginning plot which will set the characters and the scene, a middle which will have a conflict, and then the end which will have a conflict that is now solved and everyone kind of lives happily ever after. The difference in pantomime and storytelling is pantomimes are always very exaggerated, like commedia and melodrama, and they'll have your kind of stock characters that will always have like the same kind of characteristics, and they'll have a same type of hierarchy. So there'll be a hero and a damsel and a villain, and they'll always have those stock characters. And also pantomimes very much tend to break the fourth wall, and the audience will get to interact with the pantomimes and kind of yell when the villain's behind the hero and loads like that. And pantomimes are very careful to when they break the fourth wall to make sure the audience is actually interacting, because the fourth wall can be kind of tricky to use sometimes. See, like, comedians use it to break the fourth wall because often when you do, people find it quite funny because you get to actually interact with the piece of art that you're watching. And often when you see the fourth wall being broke, it's normally in quite a light sense, and it's not really in a more of a serious situation, because often the audience will feel like it's their time to talk when the fourth wall is being broken. So in a lot of serious situations, you never really see the fourth wall being broke. And storytelling is generally naturalistic. It can be a lot like pantomimes as well, but then it'd be more kind of like a pantomime. But storytelling can be serious, it can be a comedy, it can be in any genre, just as long as there's a beginning, middle, end. So it kind of has the same structure, but it can be in different genres. And storytelling and pantomimes, they originated in the 16th century and was developed from commedia as well. That's why they also have the same stock characters, like I said earlier. In the industry, pantomime and storytelling are often little companies who travel around schools or kind of little theatres and do their performances, and they're often a little company who works with loads of different schools around the country. The next bit of live performance I'm going to talk about is theatre and plays. Theatre and plays date back to the 5th century and they were invented by a man called Aeschylus. However, it was popularised by the one and only Shakespeare in the 1600s. Shakespeare really helped the creative industry as well, because the Queen and the royalty around that time would always come and watch Shakespeare's plays. Shakespeare really, really helped the creative arts industry and really put it on the map. Plays can be many different genres and so many different styles. They can range from horror to comedies to literally anything. And the styles are sometimes naturalistic nowadays. Many are very naturalistic unless you see some Shakespeare being performed, but the only really unnaturalistic thing about that is the rhythm and the pace. And you see many different techniques and different methods that people use in every single different plays. And theatre is very popular nowadays and back then, from when Shakespeare was around, and many people from poor to rich when Shakespeare was around would be able to watch Shakespeare's plays because he'd have different levels of people, and theatre was really made for anyone and everyone to come and watch. Also, theatre nowadays has so many different things like lighting and staging that can just help further make the plays better and further symbolise different things with plays. Like red lighting can symbolise danger, blue lighting can symbolise drowning or feeling submerged. There are so many different staging and elements that are now added in that we obviously didn't have back in Shakespeare's time. The next thing I'm going to be talking about is recorded performance. The first part of recorded performance I'm going to be talking about is radio plays. Radio plays date back to the 1920s, but they started to be more popular at around the 1930s, as there were a few popular radio plays like Amos in Andy, which was a crime drama. Radio plays can range from one person playing all characters or a few playing, sharing some roles, but radio plays almost always include multi-rolling. So an actor really has to rely on his range in his voice and the pitch, because obviously the audience doesn't have a visual representation, so they can't differentiate the characters. The only thing they have to differentiate is the accents and the voice. So multi-rolling was a very large key bit of radio plays, because if we didn't have that, they couldn't really get like a whole cast of people in a booth to record a radio play. The second bit of recorded performance I'm going to be talking about is films. Films date back to 1895, however, films were popularised around the 1930s. Silent films were thriving around then in this time, and people like Charlie Chaplin thrived in the style of commedia with their very exaggerated body and facial expressions that they really relied on because obviously they're silent films, so they have to really, really, really rely on their facial expressions and their body language to get what they want to get across to the audience. Films nowadays have huge productions and huge budgets and almost always are very naturalistic in a style unless you have kind of things that break boundaries like Black Mirror. As Black Mirror, I think in 2018 it was released a interactive film on Netflix that let the audience choose what was happening to the characters, and I thought that was amazing and allowed the audience to break the fourth wall, and hopefully in the future we'll have a lot more stuff like that allows audience to interact with films even more. And there are millions and millions of jobs within the film industry, like directors, just production, and it's just huge production. You have designers, directors, actors, just so many jobs in the industry within filming. And during the last couple of months or so, COVID's actually really affected the film industry as cinemas have to close. So production in filming has just gone back and back and set back, and everything's going to be paused for the industry at the moment. Also, actors in the film industry get paid millions and millions per film, and if the actor is even more famous, then their pay is even higher because they want them in the movie. Because if a famous actor like, say, Robert Downey Jr. is in a movie, you're gonna get so many more viewers, and that's pretty much what every industry and company wants for their films. So Robert Downey Jr. gets around 75 million per movie. However, Tom Holland, who makes the same amount of movies for Marvel, he gets 15 million per movie. So depending on how famous and how good your name is in a movie, you get paid more because your namesake is worth more. So in the film industry, sometimes talent can be overlooked if you have a big name, because they want films to get views and really hit it off in cinemas, because that's what makes them their money back on their huge production. Last two bits of recorded performance I'm going to talk about is recorded theatre. Recorded theatre is exactly the same as normal theatre, except from recorded and then sold to a streaming service like Hamilton. Hamilton was sold to Disney Plus for around $1 billion, which is huge, and it made so much because people, obviously there's a select amount of people that can go see it on Broadway, so then when it's put on a streaming service it can sell for so much. But you don't see this happen a lot with theatre. There can be other small productions that are recorded and sold to like small kind of streaming platforms, but sometimes, rarely, you'll see big things like Hamilton being sold. And the last bit of recorded performance I'm going to talk about is TV shows. TV shows started in 1928. The first ever TV show that was aired was in September the 11th, 1928. It was called The Queen's Messenger. TV, just like films, has a huge amount of jobs and many sectors, which I will also explain later. TV budgets on a whole are usually a lot. However, they are overall less than filming budgets, as films are usually more profitable. But there are some TV shows that exceed that stereotype and exceed expectations, and they just make millions and millions and millions on their streamings. For example is Game of Thrones. It's one of the most, I think, the most profitable TV show ever. And another example is The Walking Dead. These shows have obviously a very, very huge production and huge budgets, but they also make that back and earn millions and millions upon millions. And TV shows have many different genres as well, like films that range from horror to comedies, and they allow so many people to really express how they want to feel. And TV shows often have many different stuff they reflect on as well. Like TV shows nowadays, you see them really hounding in on really political kind of issues and issues that we really want to see. So TV shows now and documentaries and loads of things like that, they kind of help our economy as well, because they teach us some stuff that we don't really get taught in schools. And TV shows are normally in a naturalistic kind of style. You don't really get nowadays a lot of kind of non-naturalistic things unless you really like look for it, as what people like nowadays are naturalistic stuff, unless you're watching stuff like Black Mirror, as I said earlier. Now I'm going to be talking about industry structures and the different kind of roles there are in industry. In the industry, there are so many different roles and jobs that you could have. Here we have a director, an actor, a producer, an executive producer, a stage manager, a deputy stage manager, assistant stage manager, loads of people in design. There's costume design, props design, set design, light designs, sound designs. There are loads of technicians and operators and sound operators. There are so many people who make costumes and do makeup. There are also things like security, ushers, box office people, and playwrights. There are so many different loads of roles in the industry and within the industry. Some of the foundations of performing arts industry are that it's quite hard to break into, and you have to be kind of realistic when you're going for it, because you have to know that it is a hard industry to get into, and for the industry you have to be the best of the best, or you need to know people, you need to have some contacts within the industry, and you need to know what you're good at as well. If you're not good at some types of acting, then don't audition for those types of acting, because you need to be the best of the best. And if you know you're not good at something, there's no point of going for said thing. Also, in the industry, you need to have a good work ethic. You need to know that you need to do what you're told. You need to be on time, be enthusiastic. You need to be committed. You need to be respectful, and you need to put in a lot of effort, and be very, very disciplined. And you also need to take when people are criticizing you. You need to be able to take criticism, and you need to be able to improvise and challenge yourself. And you really, really, really need to be able to interpret something in your own way and in the way that the directors want you to. If a scene, you need to interpret in your own way, and also how it's supposed to be. So a scene, a character, the text, you need to make sure you interpret all of that correctly. The last bit I'm going to be talking about is the types of company and theatre. First, we have large scale. Large scale is kind of your West End and your Hollywood and all the films and TV productions, like I was talking about. Like you have your Robert Downey Jr.'s and stuff, and that would be in large scale. And films like big films that are in cinema and on TV on Netflix, that will all be part of large scale. Then we have medium scale, which will be like the kind of off West End kind of things. For example, Women in Black. And you have like kind of small theatres that do their own things. So there's Watford Theatre as well. That's an example of medium scale. So loads of things that just like aren't on West End, but they're medium scale. And then we have small scale, which is kind of touring companies that kind of go around doing like pantomime stuff as well, like how I said earlier, like they're normally part of small companies that tour, and they'll go to schools for example, and kind of like fringe theatre. So that's all part of small scale theatre. So they're kind of, you have your stuff that will go to schools, and you kind of see people performing Macbeth and stuff when you're doing your GCSEs. Those are a type of small scale theatre. The next thing I'm going to be talking about is social impacts. There are many, many different social impacts within performing arts. For example, performing arts is such a creative industry, and it allows everyone to express themselves. The arts allows us to show pride in who we are and the characters that we create. It also allows us to work with each other and work on teamwork. Like, there are different relationships that you can have, an actor to actor, a director to actor. You working with each other is just a really good experience and allows you to work on your teamwork. Also, TV shows and films shed light on many different important issues like racism, sexism, homophobic kind of stuff, homophobia. It really reflects on those different things nowadays. You see a lot that deal with actual issues and help people have a better understanding of those issues. TV also really helps shine light on mental health for me, especially. I'm watching loads of shows. I have a better understanding on how people are feeling and how the people around me may be feeling. And something that we barely taught in schools as well is about mental health. So TV really helps and for kind of betters our society because it teaches us a lot. And it, for example, a show called Euphoria on HBO does an amazing job about talking about bipolar disorder, and shows like this who really, really hound in on stuff like that, they really teach young people like me what people are going through in the world, and it gives us a better understanding. And there's billions of people who are viewing all these shows and having a better understanding of different mental health and different issues that we really do need to hound in on. Last of all, I'm going to be talking about how the industry has developed. First of all, the industry has really, really developed because of different technology. Different technology changed the film and TV industry. When people realised that they could have different camera angles, different lighting and different sets for film and TV, the industry kept getting bigger and better, as the way you light a scene can frame the scene and completely change the way a scene is interpreted, as well as the way you film a scene. The way you film a scene can make a scene be completely and utterly different, and there's so many different shots and different ways that you can frame a scene that literally changes the entire kind of motive behind the scene. It gives a different interpretation. It gives so much more creative power to directors now that we have technology to do so. As with live theatre, you can't do so as much, but lighting as well, like I said, is a big part of it as well. So we have that, and then with films and TV, filming, the way a scene can be shot can seriously change the way that it can be interpreted. And as well as the way you film a scene, like it really, really helps. And it's kind of developed because we have people who are more aware and able to talk about political stuff and issues that we want to deal with. Over the years, people have been so much more brave and bold with their TV shows and their ideas and their creative content that they are now able to talk about issues like racism, and shows really, really deal with serious stuff. And even the more we experience and the more we grow and the more the industry grows, the more we've experienced, the more different things we have. We have bigger ideas, bigger statements. Like, when there's more things happening in the world, there's so much more creative content coming from it, because the more we experience, the more we are able to express. So things like Black Mirror and so many futuristic things like Interstellar, ideas that you can't even comprehend, they happen because of what we are going through in our real life. Like, these ideas come from real life experiences. So the industry is developed because we keep living, we keep on going. As the years go on, we experience more and more ideas, and more creative content flows out from this. That is all that I have to say about the foundations and development of the performing arts industry. Thank you very much for listening.